Okay, this is our actual 57 Bassman, and like the Marshall we looked at and like the early Trainer, you can see there's that, since this is a 57, some of the parts look significantly different even though they're the same value or function. This is a 250 microfarad bypass cap for the first shared gain stages. Also, since this is a Bassman, the layout is different in the sense that controls are facing the top, the card is where we expect to see the card, and the tubes are folded up on the edge of the chassis. So we have the two 0.02 coupling caps, the 270 mixer resistors, which are responsible for bringing the two channels together and where your interactive volume controls happen. This is where Marshall chose to, in some cases, bypass one of these caps to make the channel brighter. This particular amp, being a 57, has the classic Marshall style tone stack with a pair of O2s and a 250 picofarad treble cap, as well as the 56K slope resistor. What is interesting, because this is a 57, your second gain stage is bypassed with a 25 microfarad cap. So actually this edition of the amp actually has more gain than the quote-unquote the 59. By 59 this disappeared, and in some cases this went from 0.2 to 0.1, as we saw in the Trainer amp. By late 59 this became 100K, this became 0.1, which are the same values as they later used in the Super Reverb. In this amp we see the bright volume control has a 100 picofarad treble bypass cap. That's what makes the amp bright in that channel, and the rest of the amp is pretty much the classic thing, what you expect to see in these types of amps. And you'll notice this amp is completely unmodified, as was the Marshall we showed you earlier. There's your selenium early rectifier diode to create the bias, and of course these amps were tube rectified, and in this case, because it's a 57, it has the mercury vapor tube rectifier. I guess we shouldn't break that at any point in our looking at this thing. This amp has its original tongue saws in it, and probably tongue saw preamp tubes, although I haven't looked in quite a while. Great sounding little amp. See if we can hear it. So we should see if we can blow this amp up by turning it on. Volume on 0. That's 2. There's things going on with this amp. That's the magic of the Bassman. This is an excellent example of what I like to call a project amp. It was an 82 Marshall base model, 50 watt, and When I acquired it, it had had a master volume installed in it. But curiously enough, whoever had installed the master volume had not modified the amp at all to be a lead amp. Now by 1980, by the time the JCM 800s were on the horizon and so on, Marshall was not 100% happy with using the traditional Bassman circuit for their bass amps, so they had modified the tone stack and made a number of other modifications to the amp to make it more useful as a bass amp, which took it away from the traditional tweed early Marshall design. So what I did when I got this amp was decided to put it back to the way most people would enjoy it, which is as a typical 1986 model bass amp. Okay, you'll notice that this amp has the so-called Parkhead Mod on the volume control, and that is the where a bright cap would go is replaced with a resistor, so that the taper of the volume control comes up that much faster. What we did notice with the early tweed Bassman and some of the more remarkable sounding early Marshalls was that the volume control had a lot of leakage at low volume, contributing to the fatness of the amp at the very early gain stages. So that's 0.